go over some concepts that I think we can apply to your operations, and we'll kind of go from there. But a little background, I grew up on a dairy farm in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and ended up going to school at Penn State for agronomy. Ended up getting a master's degree in Washington State, doing weed ecology work, weed science work. And I worked for Penn State doing dairy and agronomy work. Eventually hooked up with my family farm, and we moved the herd from Lancaster to Tennessee. So I do have some southern experience. Stayed there 2 years. My brother's still in operation there, so we talk a lot. So we know what the southern challenges are like. Now we had more heavy soil, not this light soil. So I've kind of then got back into the seed industry, and well, I did another stint in extension doing farm financial work, basically making changes to make money, that type of thing, and evaluating it. And then I got into the seed industry, and believe it or not, Jonathan Rupert hired me. It was my first seed industry job. So anyway, then we came into King's AgriSeeds. So I've been working for King's AgriSeeds since 2002, and was able to become a partner in 2006, and I bought the business from the founder in 2008. And as Josh mentioned in the opening talk, we officially launched Southeast AgriSeeds in 2016. And the reason we did that is we fully recognize that the South is a good bit different than the Northeast, okay, as far as what works and what doesn't work. However, the concepts are still the same. So we wanted people to understand that, you know, when you pick up a book from Southeast AgriSeeds, a lot of the products are going to work for you. Some may not. Some probably won't. Okay, we need to recognize that. But if you picked up a book from King's AgriSeeds, I guarantee you a lot more would not work down here. So that's the idea. And we have 2 of our local dealers in the back. We rely on our dealer networks, folks, to fine-tune what works in your backyard. All right, so with that said, we've been working with forage mixtures. That is my background. I've been working with it for years. And grass management is very, very important to us. It's the heart of who we are. We also do cover crops, but really, this is the heart of what we are. And so again, this is going to talk about my perspective, and I will also say that I've learned a lot from other people. So the first part of my talk is some information from Professor Marvin Hall, who is an awesome teacher. But again, I have some ecology background as well. And you know, when we plant one species out there, or 2, it's pretty simple. But what happens when we put more species out there? And you know, so is simple better than complex? If you look at ecological research, it suggests that you know, there is productivity benefits. The reality is if you're working with a single species in particular, you have the same root system out there, the same upright parts of the plant, and it has its limits. Okay? So if we start mixing different things in, when say the one that maybe you were used to has its flat points of productivity, these other guys will come in there and fill things up. So there's better nutrient use, and I'm going to say this in a couple ways. There is nutrient use of what's in the soil. We have roots that go deep, we have roots that go shallow, depending on the species, and you're mining different areas, and a lot of those deep rooted materials, as opposed to a straight grass, will pull up micronutrients and then redeposit on the top, so it benefits everything. The other deal on nutrient use is, I'm going to ask you guys, okay, so I came at it from an agronomy approach. Is there another better nutrient use if we have mixtures together, in theory? Paige, we need more door prizes. Get them awake. Okay, I mentioned the agronomy side. Is there another efficiency in nutrient use here?
Yes.
Yes.
Feeding the microorganisms, the mycorrhizae, and stuff like that.
Okay, there's actually 3 now, because that's the soil health side, and it's big. Having complex root systems of different things is feeding the, I'm going to call it the underground wildlife, okay, your soil life. Over here.
Oh, he already got
Oh
one.
man, okay, we got somebody else that got to get this. Okay, so we fed the plant, we fed the soil life. What else are we trying to feed? I heard a hen over there. Livestock, over here. Livestock. So yeah, in reality, you know, nutritionists get all kind of like, especially in the dairy industry, we get all, it's amazing to hear Dr. Rayburn's talk on beef nutrition versus a dairy nutritionist. It's like you're on 2 different planets. But anyway, if you have a mixture out there and the cow's a little short on something, she knows what she's doing. She's going to go get it. And there's a lot of forbs out there that have medical uses, micronutrients, and even other things that are like medicines for those animals. So it's an agronomy thing, it's a soil life thing, and it's a animal performance thing too. So you do get these, and that's the theory. The thing that I really think is a great theory is increased stability of yield, resilience, and resistance to invasion. Now, that's the theory. So Dr. Marvin Hall did a trial with some USDA ARS folks to see if it works on the practical side of farming. And what they found, they did some surveys, and this is Northeast. I don't know how much diversity you're going to have down here. You know, as your soils get more restrictive, there's going to be less and less diversity. But in the Northeast, we have 268 plant species that were identified, and most paddocks ranged from 5 to 56, with an average of 30 species per paddock. That's a good bit of diversity. When you buy a seed mix, a lot of them might have, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 species in there. So that's a lot more diverse than what's out there commercially. And when they did the survey in the Northeast, again, it's going to be different down here, bluegrass, orchardgrass, tall fescue, and timothy were the dominant species. And they were the grasses. The legumes were white clover, red clover. And then they had other things like dandelion, quackgrass, plantain. It's actually good stuff. Even though they might be considered weeds, but they're very beneficial. So the dandelion and the plantain or forbs, chicory would also fall into that plane as well. The quackgrass, we're not allowed to sell a single seed of that because it's a noxious weed. It's not a bad forage though. It's an early forage. Now, again, we don't even have species up here, but this is a concept slide. It's based on real research that was done in the Northeast, Pennsylvania and Ohio. It's actually 3 different sites. But when you look at this slide, and by the way, this can be perennials and annuals. It doesn't really matter. But the concept goes across. It happens to be a trial on perennials. Where's the most yield when you look at this trial? More complex. So the 6, if you look at it, is kind of a peak. The 9, you look at it, it's not too bad. What this slide doesn't tell you is what the mixtures were. Anybody see those black lines, the vertical black lines going up and down? So this is in the middle, so that's the mean. There were 2 species mixtures that topped. That's about 5 tons of dry matter there. And there was 2 species mixtures that were pretty poor. Well, what soil are you on? what's the weather of the year. So different species have different kicks for what they're most adapted to. So for example, up our way, Timothy is one that kind of likes tight, wet soils. Well, if you put Timothy on a shaly soil, it's not going to do that much. So, that's pretty important to know what your soils are. So a simple mixture can, whoops, pressing the wrong button here. I'm getting dead battery or something. That can give you pick the right things there for the right year, and you're going to get great year, or maybe we can say the right season. But if you pick the wrong things, they can fail. So what are we doing with complex mixtures? We're taking out the risk. See how small the diversity is in yield? The stability is really tight with more complexity. So the moral of the story is, got to be thinking when you plant. From a quality perspective, again, this is across all these species, relatively flat from a fiber standpoint. From a protein standpoint, yeah, maybe you could argue there's a slight increase, but really pretty flat. That's not the issue. Now, how about legumes? We just heard an alfalfa talk by Dr. Andre. He talked about alfalfa being high in protein. Well, red clover, white clover, all those legumes are high in quality. So, protein, as the percentage of legume goes up, the percentage goes up. Now, Dr. Rayburn spoke about there's a cost to too much protein. So we got to get this balanced. And in the case of ADF, which is a fiber measurement, it goes down with more protein. Now, before fiber digestibility tests came around, the goal was lower and lower fiber. That's not necessarily what we want in a diet, because there is very digestible grasses out there. So a little quick review. As species go up, variation in yield goes down. As legumes go up, forage protein goes up. Now what I didn't really emphasize is as the grasses go up, assuming they're quality grasses, the fiber digestibility goes up as well. And fiber digestibility is a strong source of energy. So the number of species has some benefits. What you plant is the most important. Now, forage mixtures and pests. So I think I heard since we're in a hot area here compared to where I live, I heard some talk on sorghum sedans, forage sorghums, sedan grass. And then I heard something about sugarcane aphids. Anybody experienced that in this area? Yeah, a little bit. Sugarcane aphids. Well, if you plant just a plant that's susceptible to that, guess what? They're coming in. They're going to get you if they're around. If you have more diversity there, you're going to be more insulated from that attack whenever it occurs. This happens to be the case of alfalfa. So this is what happens when you do not spray alfalfa and you have a potato leafhopper invasion, which I'm sure down here happens all the time. If we have diversity within that mix, you will not get that bronze color there. Now the data here is actually on white clover. You actually get injury from those potato leafhoppers with that too. So when we get into complex mixtures, there's very little damage at all. Simple mixtures, you get more damage. And this is Pennsylvania data. Now, a lot of states have forage trials. I don't know if South Carolina has one or not, but you need to get data from somebody, whether it be the university or the closest university or internal company trials. So that's important. The other thing is soil fertility. We mentioned about the nutrition of effective diversity. So when we plant that legume with the other plants, we're fixing nitrogen from the air into a usable fertilizer source. So by having that diversity of legumes in there, that's giving you free nitrogen. But don't forget about the other plants that pull and release things from the soil as well. It's just some data of different species. Again, this isn't going to be that valid for you guys because most of you do not grow the perennial grasses. But there's a difference between species, and we're going to say that's true whether you're going Bermuda grass, Bahia grass, or all the annuals. There's going to be a difference in their potentials. So the art of making mixtures, putting them together. Some things you have to think about. Your climate. So we're in South Carolina today. What, a couple hours from the coast or something like that. We have a lot of effect by the ocean. We're warm in the summer. Winters aren't too harsh either. So we got to pick the right species out that work with your climate. How about your soils? So on my way in here, we followed GPS through some areas that maybe we shouldn't have gone, but we were getting into these sandy roads. Well, that's going to be a lot different than your clays. Dramatically different. Harvest method. So I think I heard here we got a lot of grazing going on. Grazing is the cheapest way to make your feed, but what if we're going to make it stored? Are we going to make it wet, or are we going to make it dry? The customer. Who's the customer? Who's the customer here?
The animal.
The animal. Yes, ultimately the animal. Now you might be selling it to somebody else that will feed it to the animal, but the animal is the end customer. So you got to keep that person. The customer is also you guys, because if you plant something, you want some good results, kind of quick. But the ultimate end customer is the cow. So when we put together mixtures, again, whether they're perennial or annuals, we want things to complement each other. And sometimes a mixture, or I'm going to call it blend, can be good where you go with a blend where you have 3 different varieties of a species. Barenbrug does that a lot over time. They do a lot of blends. That's kind of how they got started, was doing blends. When you think about putting things together, establishment rates. So if you have something that starts really, really, really quick and something that starts really slow, you don't want to put too much of the fast starting stuff that will overwhelm the slow starting materials. So you got to have that. You got to have longevity. Now in the case of annuals, it's an annual. So it would just last a season. Palatability. We want things to be of similar palatability, that your animals don't pick out one and leave the rest. And then of course there's biological interactions that get complex. So I'm going to briefly go through the perennials because we're not in a strong perennial area right here. But just show you some examples of what we put together for Southeast. So this is a mix called Balancer, so where we can grow perennials well. This is a nice combination of a, Martin 2, which is a rougher, tougher product that has the beneficial endophyte in it. And we have a few, typically 2 orchard grasses. This is currently what's going in there. Endurance and Olathe. They're both earlier orchard grasses. And in the hotter your environment, and if you're using perennials, you want to get them done before the summer heat. So we go with the early. We can also use persist in that. That would fit that same category as well. Bardoro is a rugged red clover. And Rio Gray's Ladino is a taller white clover. So that's what's in that one. Then we have another one called Southern Beefmaster, which is a Barenbrug basic mixture where we're using the Bar Optima, which is a softer leafed tall fescue with the endophyte in it, the beneficial endophyte. Has some orchard grass in there. These are relatively late heading orchard grasses. Then we put in a little bit of ryegrass, and this is perennial ryegrass with a beneficial endophyte. And the reason for this is fast results, weed control. It's being used in the South as a nurse crop. Say we plant this stuff in September, it will give us nice green up for the fall, control the weeds. be in there for the next spring, and then probably after the summer, depending on how hot you are, it may or may not make it through the summer. Then we have a couple ladino clover and red clover in there. This happens to be that product in Pennsylvania. That's an animal from our farm. We do grass-finished beef research up there. So this is another one. This is a tall fescue Festaloleum called Foitan, and some early orchard grasses, and some late orchard grasses to give us different kicks at different times. And that field there in the foreground is that mix. Got a straight grass mix. Sometimes you have too many broadleaf weeds that we don't want to come in with the clovers, so we start with the grasses. We clean up things through chemicals or mowing, and then we add the ryegrass later. And this is something further north. This is the King's grazing mix, to show you how kind of you can get into a complex situation where we have, orchard grass, perennial ryegrass, meadow fescue, which is totally different than tall fescue, red clover, white clover, chicory. You could add plantain to that. You could add a whole bunch of other things for diversity. That's a shot of that mix. Another mix that you could use. So this mix we focused on energy. We wanted the highest energy we could get out of the grass. So we got the soft leaf tall fescue, the meadow fescue, perennial rye, and then red and white clovers. This would definitely not work here. So some ideas about when we're managing grass, and it doesn't really matter whether it's a perennial or annual. We have energy sites that we want to protect. Paige talked about that with her talk, where we don't want to go with a perennial grass in the middle of summer and graze it and destroy those sites, remove off that vegetation, and all of a sudden have the sun cook your soil and basically shut down the whole system. So there's different categories. Most of the grasses, not all of them, fit into the protect the bottom 3-4 inches where the carbohydrate or the energy stores or fat of the grass is stored, so to speak. So orchard grass, rye